Hello dear viewers, here is a new video that I will please you on my channel, Manhwa Compilation. I hope you like my story and how I told it to you. This story begins when suddenly all sorts of monsters started appearing in the world, which caused a significant change in it. The entity that caused these monsters to appear was the Tower, to which they gave power and authority over the monsters. People called it the Tower of God, because at the top of the tower, there were all kinds of beings, like gods and demons. Inside the tower, there were a total of 999 floors. The beings that ruled that place were gods and demons. However, the global government quickly tried to prevent people from approaching the tower. Nonetheless, the gods and demons wouldn't allow humans to stay away from the towers. They removed the obstacles and declared that anyone attempting to stop people from challenging the tower would be severely punished. 5 years later, 1 billion people began paying attention to the tower. After that, we meet our protagonist, who is about to start clearing the 600th floor of the tower. However, all the monsters that confronted him were suddenly eliminated. He shouts loudly at the 9 stars, a group of players of which our protagonist is a member and the strongest among them. However, this revelation has occurred, and they're trying to halt our protagonist, who wants to enter and clear the 600th floor. This provokes the wrath of Jim, also known as the Dark Star or the Death Star. He managed to surpass the 9 stars and was bestowed the title of the strongest, or the man who brings death, the greatest necromancer of humanity. As he prepares to fight the new star, Jim Jack tells him that all he needs is to be the strongest, and that if they dare to stop him, he will use them as summon beasts and enhance his army. However, the leader of the new star tells Jim Jack that he knew he would betray humanity and stand on their side. Our protagonist tells him to go to hell, and the individual supposes he no longer has an option. Then, he orders the members of the 9 stars to defeat Jim Jack. This unleashes one of humanity's most ferocious battles. However, Jim, the strongest man of humanity, couldn't defend against the 9 stars alone. They labeled him a traitor, accusing him of betraying humanity for more power. Yet this was only the narrative known to the world. In reality, Jim Jack didn't betray humanity. He was betrayed by the 9 stars, or more precisely, 8 of them. This fact was concealed from the world. 10 years later, we transition to the human world, where a boy awakens shouting that he's back. This boy is our protagonist, who says his plan worked. He doesn't realize that at the moment he was on the brink of death, he used a spell called soul transmigration, which allows him to travel to a body he can adapt to. It seems he found a body with a similar physique to his, but it's still in Korea. He changes his expression, cursing the 9 stars for their betrayal. He says it would have been better if he had cleared the floor alone, and those bastards offered to help but ended up betraying him. Then we flash back to when the protagonist was fighting the 9 stars on the brink of death. The leader of them asks him if he knows why they betrayed him. Paladin Cain tells him he's sure he won't be able to summon anything since they are on sacred ground. St. Carmen tells him she heard him being called the one-man army, and that, when it's just him, he's nothing compared to them. The protagonist says he was just trying to help. Cain tells him not to take it personally, as it's not that they have ill feelings towards him, but that they are weeding out the bad grass from the field. The protagonist shouts June's name at Cain, asking if that bastard was also conspiring with them. We're told June is our protagonist's friend and the combat star among the 9 stars. He decided not to participate in the 600th floor cleansing, but apparently they didn't inform him, as they might have been able to help. He gives up by telling them that they caught him and that they defeated him. However, he hopes they don't think this is the end, since he will definitely come back stronger and ensure he gets his revenge. Back in the present, our protagonist, very angry, states that he won't turn the 9 stars into his summoned beast, but he will shatter their souls so they can't reincarnate. But at that moment, he starts to hear a strange sound next to him, which turns out to be a mobile phone that our protagonist begins to use. However, he's astonished to see that 10 years have passed since his death, even though it felt like an instant. 10 years have gone by, and what kind of useless ability did he just use? Nevertheless, he's a bit scared at that moment, wondering if his new body can even use magic. And then a simple fly is in the room, which our protagonist swats away with a single motion. After that, he says the word awaken while focusing. However, the fly doesn't react, causing our protagonist to start shouting awaken like crazy. After a while, he finally realizes that his current body doesn't have a drop of mana, meaning he'll have to climb the tower without being able to use any abilities. But he starts using his phone again, saying that if 10 years have passed, it's possible that the 9 stars have reached the top of the tower. However, upon checking the news, he realizes that they've only recently reached the 800th floor, disappointing him because in 10 years, he's only managed to climb 200 floors. He changes his expression, saying that this is an opportunity, as he can catch up to them while they take their time climbing the tower and resume his revenge. He quickly puts on a jacket, stating that training outside the tower is pointless, and even though his body is that of a beginner, he possesses the knowledge of the Star of Death and will use it to become stronger. With a determined look, he tells the 9 stars to just wait a bit longer, as he'll make sure to exact his revenge. After that, we transition to the entrance of the Seoul Tower, where our protagonist is surrounded by a group of people who are also waiting for the door to open, believing that they'll become rich by climbing the tower. Our protagonist says that he's back again in the place that holds history and everyone's hopes. At that moment, the tower's entrance opens, causing everyone to start running desperately to enter. However, our protagonist remarks that this is just the beginning of his revenge. As soon as he enters the tower's first floor, the system welcomes him. The protagonist says that 15 years have passed, but at that moment, the tower's system states, "The tutorial has begun," and mentions that there's no other place like this where he can experience such a high level of difficulty. A path full of traps that will require a few days of running to reach the end. Then, the status window appears, telling him that the objective is to reach the destination and avoid all traps. All accumulated damage will be recovered when he reaches the final or starting point. Gin examines his body's status before starting the trial, noting that all the statistics of his current body are terrible. However, he's surprised to see the Ula ability, a type of mana. He vaguely remembers that this was the ability he had before he died, and perhaps physical traits and talents are different between the body and the soul. After stretching his body, he says that during the tutorial, he'll extract everything he can from them and immediately starts running at high speed. During this process, an arrow is shot at him, which the protagonist easily dodges. With a big smile, he remarks that he can see it clearly, indicating that his knowledge hasn't vanished. But then he notices a large number of arrows approaching from behind, making him slightly fearful. Nevertheless, he manages to avoid them. However, he's attacked again, causing a multitude of arrows to strike his body. Despite that, he continues moving forward, saying that he has to endure a bit more. But then, the number of arrows increases, causing all of them to hit Gin's body. Even though it hurts, he persists because he needs to keep going. After a while, we see that our protagonist has managed to crawl back to the starting area, and the system notifies him that his damage will be restored. After recovering, he says that first he'll see how much he can endure, but he can't just blindly run forward. There were 2 traits that made him. The strongest climber on Earth is one of them, _SQ_, which allows him to devour a non-living being and do his thing. After absorbing the blood on the ground, he says that it didn't have life, so he can absorb it and gain all its experience. At that moment, the system notifies the protagonist that his statistics have increased, but the protagonist says that his tolerance has increased. And even if he doesn't mind the irritating equipment setup, he can't tolerate the basic status anomaly, and it will take him a week to complete the tutorial and become a great climber. He'll endure all the arrows and continue to greatly increase his statistics with the gluttony skill until he completes his tolerance. A month later, our protagonist is facing the end, and the system starts healing him, telling him he has passed the tutorial. The protagonist says it took him a long time because he always went back to the beginning to start over. But at that moment, his status window appears, telling him that many gods and demons are taking interest in his method. The protagonist sighs, saying they're here again, and then shouts loudly, "You sick, sadistic bastard!" and doesn't realize that the gods and demons watch the climbers to see if someone assimilates with or resembles them. But the system notifies him that the gods are angry at his blasphemy. But the protagonist says that none of them are revealing their names, so they're probably playing with him to make him their disciple. However, at that moment, the system notifies him that it seems a demon is smiling, and the pinnacle of all evil isn't greeting, asking how he's been, which amazes Jin, saying it's that stalker bastard again. and we're told that the pinnacle of all evil in his past life was the demon that stuck to him like gum to make him his disciple, and he surely recognized him, as he's the person who allowed him to obtain the transmigration of soul ability. But he's interrupted again by the system, which tells him that both the gods and demons are taking interest in him, which annoys him, and he tells the demon why they're not after him. The pinnacle of all evil apologizes to our protagonist, while at the same time, the gods tell our protagonist they want to talk to him, which annoys him, and he tells them to shut up, and if they want to secretly observe him, then they should shut up and watch. The system tells Jin that the evil demon is in a bad mood, who tells it to shut up, that if he chooses someone, he definitely wouldn't be the one. But he changes his expression, wondering if he should check the tutorial rewards. At that moment, a variety of status windows appear, notifying him of all his statistics. Jin says it's good, as he was even able to get mana at this stage, but the system notifies him that due to his growth progress, a trait has been unlocked, which amazes Jin, as he already has the gluttony trait. However, he understands that the body he possesses already had a trait, and at that moment, the trait is unlocked, and the system notifies him that he has obtained the all-terrain trait, which leaves Jin very confused, as he doesn't know that trait. However, the system notifies him that the all-terrain trait is a talent that allows him to be good at everything, no matter what it is. This greatly pleases Jin, who says that with that rank, it might be possible for him to get the name he failed to obtain, even though he had been preparing for it for a long time, and now he can be the best at everything, the ultimate master. But at that moment, the system notifies him that the pinnacle of all evil is curious about his status window, which astonishes Jin, but he leaves, telling him to forget it, and that he will go to the next floor, but he's free to follow them if he wants. And as Jin goes through the portal, he says that the next room must be the room of choices and training. As soon as he enters the place, the system welcomes him to the room of injury and training, and says he can choose the soul and class that suits him best. And once he has made his choice, he must destroy the ground beneath him, and then he will be teleported to the first floor of the tower. Jin says that in his past life, when he found out he was of the mana type, he didn't hesitate for a second and chose to be a mage. However, now that he's all-terrain, he must see how impressive the trait is. At that moment, the system notifies him that targets have been generated, who uses the bow he picked up to shoot 3 arrows, which end up hitting the target. After that, he tells the system to generate more targets and make them attack him as well. But the system warns him that he still hasn't selected a class. What could be too dangerous is using targets that can attack, but he responds with a big smile on his face that he doesn't care. At that moment, the system generates the targets, which turn out to be a group of dolls. After eliminating all of them, he tells the system that he wants more and more challenge. The system accepts his request, so Jin, without wasting time, launches himself with a spear and pierces through one of the targets. Then he takes out 2 daggers with which he eliminates the smaller targets. However, at that moment, flying targets appear, astonishing Jin as they are long-range attackers. He manages to take cover while running towards his weapons. In that moment, the system warns him that these are the strongest and most dangerous targets that can appear on this floor. While running, Jin says, "And so are those the strongest?" He will have to use his specialization. Quickly, he grabs a staff. Nevertheless, at that moment, the targets start charging their attack. Jin smiles and tells them that he is faster than them. He launches an attack called Magic Arrow, with which he manages to eliminate the targets. At the same time, he comments that the all-terrain trait is amazing, as it feels as if he has used each of the weapons for years. However, at that moment, his status window appears, informing him that he has achieved the Absolute Master achievement and has obtained 5,000 reward points. Quite amazed and confused, he wonders if Absolute Master is the name of a class. The system asks if he would like to select Absolute Master as his class. Jin responds that even though the Master class is quite good, he cannot give up his major advantage. He needs to choose that as his main class. So he asks the system if he can select Absolute Master as a subclass. However, the system responds that it's impossible, which surprises Jin. He asks why, and the system responds that classes can only be unlocked after the 100th floor. Jin curses as he had completely forgotten about it. He says that if he doesn't select a class, he won't be able to leave that room. Although it would be a waste, he'll have to use his achievement points. He asks the system if he can unlock his class space using his achievement points. This confuses the system at first, but then it asks Jin how he knows something like that. Jin explains that achievement points are a currency obtained by achieving specific goals. Users can make changes to the system using these points. The system asks how he knows this, and judging by his reaction, deduces that he will use his 5,000 points to unlock a class space. The system responds that it's possible, but he needs 5,050 points to unlock class spaces. Currently, Jin only has 5,000 points, so he doesn't have enough at the moment. Jin sighs, saying that he supposes he has no choice. Then he tells the system that the summit of all evil has revealed its identity to him and has spoken to him. There must be an achievement for speaking to the gods for the first time. The system says he has achieved an accomplishment, as the summit of all evil has spoken to him, the great demon Baal. He has obtained 200 achievement points. Jin asks if he did a good job, which irritates Jin. He pleads with him not to do it again, but Jin ignores him. The system congratulates Jin on obtaining the Absolute Master subclass and notifies him that he will be teleported to the first floor of the tower if he destroys the choice and training room. Jin was ahead of this and prepared a spell. With a big smile on his face, he says he will begin his revenge then. He will be transported to the first floor of the tower. At that moment, we transition to the first floor of the tower, the Coral Forest. There we see a group of players in trouble due to some kobolds, which are attacking them fiercely. However, in the sky, a portal opens from which Jin emerges. Seeing the kobolds, he says that is his first prey. After eliminating them, he comments that it's been a while since he encountered a kobold. His expression changes, and he asks the kobolds what he will gain once he devours them. At that moment, we switch to the guys behind Jin. They tell him that it's incredible he defeated a kobold in one try. Although they think Jin might be a mage, he managed to defeat it with a kick. However, another one of the individuals says that they don't know who it might be. But if they manage to fight together, maybe they can defeat the kobold, who with a strong look tells them to get lost, as those kobolds now belong to them. The very frightened individuals run away, telling Jin that they'll get lost immediately. However, Jin is interrupted by the growl of the kobolds, who ask the kobold if they want to avenge their comrade, causing the kobolds to launch themselves at Jin with all their might. However, he instantly eliminates one, which leaves the other paralyzed. Yin asks him what he's doing and why he's not attacking. However, the kobold runs away, and as Jin prepares a magical spell, he asks if he thinks he'll let him escape. Then he casts his magical arrow attack, which pierces through the kobold and eliminates it. After that, the system appears, welcoming him to the first floor and notifying him that to advance to the next floor, he must complete the mission of defeating 10. Who says that's easy, as he can now defeat about 100 without a problem. But he wonders if he should take the opportunity and achieve the assassin achievement. They don't mention that if he kills one type of monster 1,000 times, he'll receive the assassin achievement, and that in his previous life, he tried to achieve all the assassin achievements. But now he'll fill his stomach and use his gluttony ability, which allows him to absorb the powers and stats of the kobold. However, his ability allows more than that, as despite stealing their strength, it also lets him see their memories. But he's interrupted by his status window, which displays his stats and astonishes Jin as they've increased immensely. Moreover, he gained a class adjustment, as he's now an absolute master, getting the bonuses that come with all classes. Suddenly, he begins to see the memories of one of the kobolds he eliminated, where it was running non-stop, and then kidnapping people under the influence of a kobold lord. He becomes fascinated by these memories, and learns that the lord is the leader of a monster wave, and now he can achieve his assassin achievement while collecting at the same time. But if he wants to face a wave, he must assemble his own army. At that moment, he tells the kobolds on the ground to awaken, and we see them come to life again, transforming into skeleton soldiers. The system congratulates him, saying he successfully changed to the diplomat class, and he's an absolute master with memories from his past life. Changing classes is quite simple due to this, but he won't be satisfied with that as there's a hidden class on the first floor he needs to acquire. However, he notices his soldiers staring fixedly at the kobolds, who tells his skeleton soldier to kill any kobolds they see, and after they eliminate the kobolds, we see that he's formed a small army. Eventually, he stumbles upon a small cabin in a forest, so he enters and tells his skeleton soldiers to wait outside. Inside, he destroys the floor, revealing a secret passage. While entering, he leaves a soulstone master, noting that the necromancer class is a high-ranking class that belongs to the mage class, which uses souls, as well as a master of spirits. As he observes a coffin, he says that the first master of spirits is hidden here. He opens the coffin, and a skeleton in attire emerges. Jin introduces himself as Val, and though Val asks if he's his descendant, Jin replies that it's been a long time since he last saw him. Val notes that Jin doesn't seem surprised, despite his efforts to appear fabulous. He questions whether a necromancer should be surprised by seeing a skeleton and explains that he came here after reading his diary. He admits that the diary lost its value when he changed to a mage, but he rediscovered it after becoming a spirit master. He tried to make Balkan one of his summons, but failed. Just like he responds that he's sorry, but first he should go to the 10th floor, and that the spiritual master is a class with a higher rank, even higher than a necromancer. So he first needs to make the second class change on the 10th floor's class change tower. However, Jin tells him that he's already a necromancer and shows his status window, which astonishes him because Jin changed his class on his own without going to the 10th floor. He thinks that Jin is more outstanding and skilled than him. This hits Jin like a ton of bricks, but he asks Balkan if he's going to change his class. In that moment, Jin sits in front of him while Balkan gathers his powers and then transfers them to Jin, ultimately obtaining the spiritual master class. But at that moment, we're told that long before the tower appeared on Earth, Balkan was the climber who ruled it. Although he was the strongest necromancer, he continued to seek ways to become even stronger since the invocations made of skin and bone weren't enough for him. Therefore, he sought a stronger invocation, and instead of a fighter or a death knight, he wanted to summon something entirely different. After some time, he managed to obtain a soul, which he called the Soul of the Dead, with which he could create a new summon that surpassed all others. After a long time, he managed to create a new class called the Spiritual Master. However, his body had succumbed to old age at that point, so the new Spiritual Master class was also on the brink of disappearing. Despite this, he had one last resort and ended up using necromancy on himself, becoming a skeleton. He had to wait for one of his descendants to reclaim his honor. In order for Balkan to find a climber to follow in his footsteps, he ended up becoming somewhat like an NPC. Upon his return, Jin had already obtained the Spiritual Master class, just like he tells Jin that the idiot he mentioned earlier was the second one, and now he is the third Spiritual Master, and he only needs to use the Soul of Souls to capture souls, and then he only has to call his summon. Jin smiles, thanking him and telling him that with the Soul Crucible he gave him, his first capture will be him. However, it seems that Balkan doesn't hear this, and tells Jin that now he just needs to keep climbing and spread his name in the tower. But Jin tells him that he can do that himself. Balkan looks quite confused, then changes his expression, telling Jin that he's a bastard, and asking if he forgot the promise written in the diary. Jin says that imposing his work on others is a bad habit, but not to worry, he will fix it, and he'll do it for free. Balkan, a bit nervous, asks why he's getting closer like that. However, at that moment, Jin uses his new soul collector on him, which starts absorbing Balkan's soul. However, Balkan undoes his body and leaves the place, asking Jin if he thinks he'll let himself be captured by someone like him. However, Jin smiles, saying that he succeeded. At that moment, we see the soul stones he previously threw starting to react while Balkan leaves. He tells Jin that this gesture must be offensive to humans on Earth, as he learned it from the previous descendant, and that they'll meet in hell. At that moment, he ends up colliding with a barrier and realizes that he fell into a magical spell. But at that moment, Jin approaches, asking him what he thinks and if he finds it comfortable. He mentions that he used a magic wall, which is a low-class spell, but he created a personal prison for him. Balkan shouts, asking if he thinks he's safe doing that, as he'll break it at any moment. But Jin, with a big smile on his face, asks him if he thought that was the only thing he had prepared. He tells him that he spread many kobold soul stones along the way and used magic to activate them like now. He tells him that he can easily break it, but he can do it before Balkan captures him. Balkan wonders who Jin is and how a first-floor climber has such abilities and stats. Jin tells him he failed in his previous life, but he finally managed to capture him. At that moment, Balkan realizes what's happening and asks if he's still the second spiritual master, or if he should be considered the third. So Balkan explodes, mentioning Jin's previous name. However, at that moment, Jin uses his new ability, the Soul Collector, and manages to capture him. After that, Jin tells him not to get angry, as now that he's with him, whatever he wants or desires can become reality. After that, Jin exits again and reunites with his small army. At that moment, the system notifies him that the pinnacle of all evil is heading towards him. The vigilant demon of death is curious about his class, who says that it will show him soon if he doesn't bother it, so he just has to wait. While he watches, his army says that he supposes he no longer needs skeletons as soldiers, so he destroys them, and then starts using his soul ability. After that, spirits start emerging from his body, which they determine are coming out and gathering in front of Jin. He says that he supposes they can't talk either, but at that moment, he's interrupted by Balkan, who calls him and asks how he dares to use him as his servant. Balkan approaches Jin, saying it's the first time he's seen him in that form, and that he must have been very handsome when he was young. However, very angry, he shouts loudly at Jin not to underestimate the first spiritual master. Nevertheless, at that moment, Valen feels a chill throughout his body and falls to his knees. He tells him not to exaggerate, as he's alive thanks to his mana, and if he takes it away, he'll immediately dissipate. Balkan asks him if he thinks he'll perish like a dog. He approaches, changing his expression and asking if he has options, reminding him of what he did to his disobedient family members, clearly transforming them into soul orbs and absorbing them. He also hopes he hasn't forgotten what his trait is. Balkan says he apparently still possesses the gluttony ability, and surely if he disobeys, he'll swallow him whole. So he reluctantly agrees to be his subject and asks Jin what he's going to do now. He asks him if he can't feel it and points to a castle, saying they have to bring down that bastard. After that, we move to the castle of the Lord of the Kobolds. We see some guards who notice Jin's presence. He approaches slowly, assuming a fighting stance and smiling as he releases his small army from his body. But at that moment more appear, launching themselves at Jin. However, he says they're nothing to him, and that he won't stand idly by in this life. So he tells the kobolds to take them to their lord. Inside the castle, we see the head of the kobolds who detects an intruder. He tells his subordinate to prepare the offering quickly. Back with Jin, after he and his small army have wiped out all the kobolds, he says hidden classes are awesome. However, he senses a strange aura and notices the room of the Lord Kobold must be nearby. Suddenly the system notifies him that the pinnacle of all evil is encouraging him with a light stick, who tells him he doesn't need to be cheered on by an old guy with hairy legs, as he'll win anyway. Moving to the Lord of the Kobolds, he is dissolving a body that seems to be a person's, and we see the blood piling up. At the same time, the Lord of the Kobolds says he needs more, and that it's not enough. They should continue until he's satisfied, and he exclaims, "Glory to the Death Watcher." Then his subordinates bring in the next offering, astonishing him as he calls it, a touchdown. He approaches to examine it closely and says it will be a much better offering than humans. However, at that moment, someone attacks him. He ends up dropping the girl, and it's revealed to be Jin. The Lord Kobold asks him if he's the intruder, to which Jin smiles, seeing that the Lord of the Kobolds is using human sacrifice for an invocation. He comments that it's irrelevant anyway, as it's going to fail. The Lord Kobold asks Jin once again if he's the intruder, and Jin says he must be the Lord of the Kobolds, who looks exactly like a leader. This angers the leader of the Kobolds, who tells Jin that his name is Maluma, the king of all kobolds, and he should show more respect. Jin just smiles, stating that he's too arrogant for a first-floor monster, and challenges him to make him show respect. Meanwhile, we shift to the girl, who says she doesn't know what's going on. But it seems the Lord Kobold is distracted by the strange human who just appeared. This is her chance, so she doesn't waste time and flees the scene. This annoys the Lord of the Kobolds, who asks the observing demon of death for more power. Upon hearing this name, he ponders. In that moment, the Lord Kobold attacks the girl. As she trips and falls while running, just as she's about to be impaled, she thinks she can't die here. Jin dashes forward at full speed, using a single kick to halt the Lord Kobold's attack. What astonishes King the most is that he smiles with excitement, and at that moment, the girl thanks Jin, but he tells her he doesn't care, and she should just leave the place. However, upon seeing her horns, he asks her if she's a dodo, and tells her that they are a powerful species living on the 100th floor. There's no reason for her to descend to a lower floor, especially as an individual who hasn't even reached adulthood. His expression changes, wondering if something has happened on the 100th floor, and he decides to save this information for later. Suddenly, he's interrupted by the leader of the kobold, who questions Jin's audacity to interrupt their sacrifice. He tells the girl that if she wants to live, she should go and hide somewhere because he won't save her twice. She thanks him and leaves. However, the kobold leader questions why Jin isn't attempting to stop this. As the lord of the kobold falls to the ground, he wonders how a first-floor climber can have so much strength. Meanwhile, Jin lies in front of him, asking what he's doing, and that they've only just begun. Suddenly, the lord of the kobold shouts the name of the demon Death Observer and begs him to save him. Behind him, the blood of the sacrifices begins to react and launches itself at Jin. It catches his arm and transforms into a blood golem. The lord of the kobold starts laughing, asking Jin what he thinks and if he can see the level of the strongest spirit user. Jin changes his expression, asking if he even realizes whom he's talking to right now. The kobold leader becomes extremely frightened as he witnesses their golem being defeated so easily. He tells Jin that even though he's a lord monster, blood golems are not something a kobold can create. He asks if it was the work of the Death Observer demon. At that moment, the system appears, notifying that the Death Observer demon is surprised and nods silently. He changes his expression, mentioning that he was already curious about Jin's spiritual powers. He reveals that he summoned a blood golem when he saw him fighting one of his believers. The lord of the Cowbolver was merely a toy he was playing with. He mocks the kobold leader, stating that his mana must be depleted since he summoned a golden. However, at that moment, the lord of the kobold yells loudly that his lord will take revenge, even if it means death. As he attacks, he tells Jin to wait and make sure to do it, as he has much to say later on. As the spirits torment the kobold lord, he implores him, acknowledging him as his king. However, Jin lifts his gaze, and the kobold lord seeks help from the Death Observer demon. He tells him that this is the end for his toy, and that it's his fault for testing him. He scolds the kobold lord for attempting to test him in the first place. The system's status window appears, informing that the Death Observer demon is laughing heartily, saying that he loves it. If you've reached this point in the video, remember to leave a like, and if you enjoyed the content, you can subscribe and enable the notification bell on YouTube to be notified when I upload a new video. Let's continue with the summary. However, at that moment, Jin eliminates the kobold lord. Then Jin approaches the lifeless body of the kobold lord, asking if he's dead. However, at that moment, the kobold lord's soul leaves his body, but Jin captures it, asking where he thinks he's going. He apologizes but says he still has work to do. They explain that soul orb production is one of the basic abilities of a necromancer. It allows the user to collect souls and create medicines they can use. At that moment, Jin consumes the kobold lord's soul. After that, his strength increases slightly, disappointing Jin as it doesn't mean much. But he's interrupted by the Dokaivi girl who approaches and thanks him for saving her. She introduces herself as Ario. He responds that she shouldn't worry, as he was only there to take care of the kobold lord. Ario says she'd still like to thank him for saving her life. However, Jin asks her what she would do if he were a bad guy, capable of killing or selling her like a goblin. Ario changes her expression, saying that if that were to happen, she'd handle it. Jin sighs in his mind, thinking that when it comes to favors and revenge, they make sure to repay their debts. He asks why someone like her, who should be on the 100th floor, is here. Ario responds that someone attacked her village. This astonishes Ajin, who says that tokebs are a quite strong species within the tower, and touching them wouldn't be an easy task, even for a high-ranking climber. Moreover, it would be one of the 4 major species: the giants of giant strength, the essence of dragon magic, the masters of demonic energy, demons, and the angels. These are the 4 species within the tower that control everything, and only those who are part of the big 4 species could bother the tokebs, either with a high price or by being associated with someone on their side. maybe even with the 9 stars. It could be someone related to their guild. Jim curses those bastards, catching Ario's attention, who asks Jin if he's okay. Jim tells her it's nothing, and he'll leave. Ariel asks Jin where he intends to go, and Jin asks her if she plans to stay here surrounded by a pool of blood. Ario tells her it would be fine if she goes with him. Jin responds that it wouldn't be a bad idea to let her join his force, but he approaches her, saying he'll be busy and can't protect her. Ario says she can do it herself, and he replies that she was almost killed by the Lord of the Kobolds just now. She responds that it was because her guard was down, and he tells her it's fine and she can go with him. Seeing her, he says he supposes she'll have to get some new clothes since it would be a hassle to attract attention with blood-stained clothing. But he's interrupted by a bright light from the kobold chief's body. Jim says it's an equipment item. After that, we see Jin leaving with Ario as they walk. A circle appears in front of him, confusing him a bit, but a voice emerges, telling Jin it's done and there are no living kobolds left in the castle. Jin tells Ario she did a good job. Ario asks Jin who that person is. Balkan asks Jin not to tell her that she can see him. Ario tells Jin that some of the Dokkaevi have a high affinity with souls. This astonishes Ajin, who, while looking at Ario, wonders if what she's saying is that she's a very special dosi. Maybe she could use Gula and absorb her ability. But for now, it would be easier to keep her by his side and train her. But he's interrupted by the system, which asks if he's willing to accept the defeat of a monster wave on the first floor. If he accepts, all safety zones on the first floor will be deactivated. Jim smiles, seeing this mission, but Balkan and Ario are astonished, asking Jin if he really intends to accept the mission to defeat the monster wave. He tells them that if he doesn't accept, then there would be no point in coming here to defeat a monster lord. At that moment, the system appears, telling him that he's being a bit reckless. At the same time, various status windows of gods and demons appear, but also the Death Observer demon appears. He tells Jin he'll reward him depending on his performance. Jin asks if he's trying to get his attention with that, and the Death Observer demon confirms it. Jin says he'll make his decision after seeing the reward. Balkan asks if he really wants to die, and Jin responds that he knows he'd be free if he dies, but he'll still be his servant even after death. Jin then accepts the mission. The system notifies him that someone has accepted the Monster Wave mission. They approach the village entrance. After a while, all safety zones on the first floor will be deactivated. Quickly, we switch to the safe zone on the first floor, where we see a group of players gathered, astonished, and wondering who the crazy person was that accepted the Monster Wave mission. If the Monster Wave arrives, they're finished. One player shouts to the others if they've completed the missions to hurry up and move to the second floor. Once the wave starts, they won't be able to leave even if they want to. Without wasting time, all players start running to the second floor. However, at that moment, a large portal appears in front of them, and from it, a large number of kobolds emerge, heading towards them. This fills the climbers with despair. At that moment, someone appears amidst the chaos, telling them to scatter. If anyone touches one of them, he'll kill them all. We see Jin with Balkan, and it's evident that Jin is about to eliminate the kobolds. The climbers ask who they are, and that this is too dangerous. And what if they don't see the large number of kobold right in front of them? However, at that moment Jin shouts, "Get up!" And a large number of living spirits emerge from his body, astonishing the other climbers. Since Jin is a necromancer, how did he acquire a class on the first floor? Nevertheless, at that moment, Jin's living spirits launch an attack on the kobots. While this is happening, Arius approaches Jin and tells him that she could also try being an assassin. He advises her to hurry because he doesn't think her ghost soldiers will leave anything. Arius smiles and assures him not to worry, as she has an idea. At that moment, she begins to open a dimensional portal, astonishing Gin. He exclaims that it's a portable platinum portal. After this, Arius takes out a sword. Simultaneously, a kobold lunges toward her. Observing this, Gina comments that the sword is definitely not ordinary, and Ando handles it skillfully without any issues. Maybe the target of the 100th floor invaders is Ario. However, Jin is interrupted by a group of climbers who ask, who does he think he is, taking control of the wave? He asks them who they are. Their leader introduces himself as Ken and asks Jin if he's heard of the guild called White Swallow. Jin asks what he means by White Swallow. Ken responds that he doesn't know it, and that White Swallow is a guild affiliated with the Holy Earth clan. famous for the Phaon brothers from the New Star. This completely changes Jin's expression, and he asks if Ken just mentioned the Phaon brothers. Ken tells him that his older brother is in the White Swallow Guild, and they'll also join the guild when they reach the 10th floor. Ken observes that Jin has good skills, and suggests that if he talks to his brother, he might allow him to join. However, Jin replies in the negative. Meanwhile, a ghost warrior appears behind him and begins to subdue him. Jin asks what's happening. The warrior says it's a good moment and he needs information. Simultaneously, he takes Emily's sword and points it at Jin, telling him he's borrowing it, and they'll have a good talk when the wave ends because he has some questions for him. Nevertheless, Jin is interrupted by Kim's subordinates who ask why he's getting in their way. They're also climbing the tower and threatening people just because they're a bit strong. They question why he's doing that. Jin asks if it isn't obvious and explains that they can't attack or kill others, nor can they steal from them. However, all that is valid on the ground because in the tower, things are entirely different, and strength is all that matters. He orders his ghost soldier to stay away from him instead of talking, unless they want him to kill them. At that moment, Kim's subordinates approach him again and ask if he really won't do anything about it. He says something that confuses his companion. Nevertheless, Jin loudly shouts at them, asking if they didn't just hear him. He tells them to get out of there because if they stay, that bastard could return and eliminate them quickly. The scene shifts to the battle where some stop and point to the sky. We see Jin and Balkan heading there. At that moment, Balkan tells Jin that they're too weak. Jin says he'll fight, and Balkan will handle control. With a slight smile, Balkan calls him bossy. But then, they both use their powers. They observe that more skeleton warriors appear and start tearing apart the kobots. Jin tells Balkan to turn anything they kill into a skeleton soldier. Balkan replies that he doesn't need to tell him. Gin leaps in, saying he'll leave it to Balkan's hands since he's going to play. The scene shifts to Ario, who's also taking down some kobold. However, she's exhausted and says there are too many. At that moment, a kobold attacks her from behind, delivering a deep cut. She lets out a loud cry. Ario remarks that something like that is insignificant compared to the agony of a burning village. It's nothing at all. We see her defeat a group of kobold instantly. However, she falls to her knees as she's reached her limit. Suddenly, she hears an explosion behind her. She says it's incredible that a first-floor climber could be so strong. She feels the need to follow that human and keep climbing the tower, as that way she can avenge her people. But at that moment, a kobold attacks her from behind. Nevertheless, she's saved at the last moment by Balk, who asks if she's okay. Amazed, she tells him she can do that on her own. Valken thinks to himself that Ario is full of determination. However, Ario asks Balkan why he helped her and why she fled from floor 100. No one tried to help her. She's glad that no one tried to hurt her, but her expression changes when she asks if he helped her because he wants something in return. Balkan replies he doesn't know, and that spirit soldiers must obey the spiritual master's orders. This amazes Ario. Valken tells Jin had instructed him to make sure she doesn't die and accomplishes her goal. Then he says he'll leave, as if he stays here doing nothing. That insolent one might accuse him of being lazy. Ario takes up her sword again, saying Jin is the only one who helped her in that tower. As she opens another portal, she says she'll make sure to repay him. At that moment, a mask materializes in her hand. She puts it on, and her expression completely changes, letting out a loud roar. Balkan stops to see what's happening, and when he turns around he sees a massive energy burst. Just like Gin, who's astonished by what's happening. Even the kobolds are amazed by Ario's new appearance. She looks dominantly at the kobolds, who are astonished by what's unfolding. One says he knew it, and that they attacked his village looking for that sword and Ario, but it's better if he keeps it a secret. If she knew it's the reason they attacked the village, who knows what might happen. But at this moment, the system appears saying, 1 minute left until the wave ends. So Balkan and Gin go all out to finish off the remaining kobolds. Balkan tells Jin the wave gate is shrinking, and with a big grin, Jin says that must be the last one. So he forcefully hurls his sword at the kobold, piercing it. The portal then closes. At that very moment, the system appears again, saying, "Wave's end. Congratulations, you succeeded." Jin smiles, saying of course he did. Balkan also smiles, calling Jin a crazy monster. At that moment, we see Ario's mask disappearing and she starts to fall, saying it's all over. But Gin catches her, asking if she's okay. He tells her using that ability when she's so exhausted isn't wise. She's quite nervous, thanks Jin. Then a status window appears for each of them. The system tells them there's a reward for the first, second, and third place in terms of contribution. Who says it's perfect and asks why they don't pay him now. The system notifies him that he achieved a milestone by defeating 2,500 kobolds. All stats increased by 5. He gained 500 achievement points. Who says stats increased by 5 and it might not seem like much now, since achievement points will accumulate in all stats, and if he learns various skills using the Absolute Master, that number will increase infinitely. But he's interrupted by the system which informs him, "You're first in the wave contribution. First place Ario, second place Jin, third place Balkan." Who, very astonished, asks Jin why he's approaching, telling him to give him his cube. Balkan says it's fine, as he wouldn't be able to use it as a spirit soldier anyway. However, Ario interrupts them, telling Jin to take her cube as a symbol of their future together. Astonished, Jin apologizes, as he was betrayed before. He said he could come with her, but he doesn't entirely trust her. The reward for second place in the wave is too valuable to accept from her unexpectedly. He doesn't want to be betrayed again. So he has to trust him, or he won't accompany him anymore. Ario lowers her gaze, thinking it over, and then takes out her portal. This surprises Jin and Balkan. Then, Ario tells Jin to take her Dokaibi mask. Balkan, astonished, asks Ario why she'd give her Dokaibi mask to a stranger. Who tells Ario that the Dokaibi mask is essentially the essence of her power. They only give it to their one partner when they declare. And why is she giving it to him? Ario says it's the price for saving his life twice, and the proof that she won't betray him. Who says that mask is worth more than that and asks why he feels there must be another reason. Ario lowers her gaze, mentioning revenge, which astonishes Jin and leaves him puzzled. Ario tells her that he hadn't told her the details, but her village was set on fire and that she tried to find survivors but didn't find any. Probably she's the last one, and as the last of her kind, she needs to avenge her species. So please, wait for her to let her climb the tower with him. Gina will watch Ario, and upon learning that she also seeks revenge, says that she's like him. The protagonist takes her cube, telling her that she'll die if she betrays him, and that he doesn't care if she doesn't have that mask, and that she shouldn't think of her as his only lifeline anymore. Ario, with a big smile, tells her Oroboni, and that she's very excited to climb with him. This leaves Jin very surprised since he doesn't know what Oroboni means. While raising the cubes up, he says she can call him whatever she wants. At that moment, we see objects materialize in the cubes. Then, the system appears, notifying him that the mana ring decreases mana consumption by 10%, the mana earring decreases consumption by 15%, and the mana necklace decreases consumption by 20%. Balkan says the reward items are good. Ario asks if they really are. Balkan responds that they're perfect for a necromancer who uses mana to maintain their army, and that it will allow him to increase the quality and quantity of summons by 45%. After Jin puts on the items, he asks how long he'll stay silent and if he thinks he's forgotten his reward. At that moment, the system appears, notifying him that the Death Watcher demon suggests he goes somewhere else. After that, we switch to the city where Jin is in an establishment. Balkan tells her the city is deserted. She speculates that they were probably evacuated to the second floor or the forest due to the wave. She tells the Death Watcher demon that's enough and to stop wasting time and hurry up. The Death Watcher demon tells him not to be so hasty. At that moment, a flash of light appears in front of him, followed by a ring very different from the one he recently obtained. Kim says it seems he's lucky with items today, and when he takes it to inspect, he's astonished, drawing the attention of Balkan and Ario, who ask Jin what's happening. He tells them the ring has demonic energy, astonishing and exciting Balkan, who asks if Jin is serious. They explain that demonic energy is a property of demons and a high-level mana source. Normally, to obtain demonic energy, one has to become a demon slave for them to grant a bit. However, the difference between having a bit and having nothing is enormous. As Jin puts on her ring, her status window appears, saying her stats have increased, and now she has the demonic energy property. The status window of the Death Watcher god also appears, offering a handshake. Jin agrees, saying for such a valuable item, he can forget his jokes. Balkan remarks that it seems he's ready to climb the tower. At that moment, The system announces that the peak of all evils burns with jealousy and is furious, wanting a handshake. The peak of all evils produces and waves a hand, saying if it wants a handshake, it must give a gift. Balkan comments that it's truly crazy, as it's trying to scam a demon. At that moment, the status window appears, notifying that the peak of all evils is rummaging through its closet, drawers, and under the bed. It says it's enough. The system notifies that the peak of all evils mumbles. It says if it doesn't want to, it doesn't have to. The system notifies that the peak of all evils claps and confirms that once the seal is stamped, there's no turning back. The system notifies that the peak of all evils will grant the gauntlet. Conditions to complete the gauntlet before entering the 100th floor are raising his name or nickname to the top of the penal tower. The penalty for failure is facing challenges to become an apostle of Baal. The reward for success is that Baal will grant the blueprints to create any object he wishes. The contract's deposit. Shaking hands with someone amazed, he says to himself that a recipe for whatever he wants, with a demonic recipe, he can do whatever he wants. If he fails, he will become its servant. But the condition is a bit tight. Even so, this is an opportunity he can't let pass. With a smile, he proceeds to accept the challenge, where Gin and Dan shake hands. Leaving, Balkan asks Jin what they're going to do now. Jin responds that he's going to the second floor right away, but at that moment, he remembers that guy 15, a serious one, and he's going to catch him first to get information from him. The guy tells Balkan he'll catch that guy for him. Balkan responds, "Who do you think he is?" as he's put a soul mark on that guy. The guy tells him the distance has widened, he considers, but he's still on the first floor, that's for sure. Balkan, angry, curses and tells Jin he should have told him that quickly, and that he's going first. Looking at Aryo, he asks why they're not walking slowly and having a chat. Aryo says yes. Jin, showing her the mask, says he'd like to hear some details about the mask while they walk. Aryo tells him that in short, it's a tool that lets you use your master's abilities. Looking at the mask, he tells him that Deep Cavy's abilities wouldn't be about sorcery and telepathy. Aryo tells him he's right. But in a special case, you can possess the ability of precognition, which consists of using telepathy to see the future. The guy tells him it's a little disappointing, and if he could choose an ability, he'd prefer one related to combat. But at that very moment, Arya stares at him, and Gin asks if he sees it that way. Aryo nods with her gaze and says he seems a bit peculiar. She tells him that different races used to come from outside the village every day, asking the sages who polished their foresight ability to show them the future, offering all kinds of things. They used to strive to avoid the variables, unable to bear the uncertainty of knowing the future. But Gin interrupts, asking if it's really necessary to avoid uncertainty, and if there are variables, wouldn't it be cleaner to break them directly? Aryo, with a smile, says she's glad, as it seems his abilities will fit him well. She turns to him and tells him she specializes in combat prediction and asks him what he thinks, since she's useful. Gin, upon hearing this, quickly moves to hug Aryo. While hugging her, he repeats to Aryo that it's perfect, where we see that Aryo is very blush. Jin, with a big smile, tells him he's glad it's her and she's the best. He says a swordsman, archer, thief, even in a fight against a combat specialist, and adding the 9-point lance, he has a chance of winning, and she can only say yes. But at that very moment, he's interrupted by the system, which tells him, the pinnacle of all evils, press the camera button. At the same time, another window pops up that says, the 9-tailed fox satisfies its appetite. Give, angry, yells at him, saying he's a stalker and to delete that now. Then he apologizes to Aryo, saying he didn't realize it. Aryo, nervous, tells him she's glad to be able to help. Jin, showing the mask, tells her that, anyway, he'll repay her for the price of that mask, and he'll join his revenge. Aryo, joyful, thanks him, and once again asks him to take care of her. We quickly switch scenes, where we see Balkan has captured Kemi. He tells him to stop fighting and that even his companions abandoned him, and he just has to wait for his master to arrive. His expression changes and he says he knows how difficult it is to keep someone alive without killing him. At that moment, Gina had just arrived, who tells Balkan he has a good grip. Balkan, angry, shouts at him, asking where he was and how much he suffered trying to stop that guy after chasing him. Gin, drawing his sword, tells Balkan to let him go for a moment. Then he tells Ken that he tried to escape. He puts his sword next to his head and tells him he has his sword, but where was he planning to take it? Who changes his expression and tells him he'll take it in his hand or stab it in the stomach depending on his answer. From now on, he'll give the information he has. Kima, terrified, tells him yes. After a few hours, he tells him he's leaving. As he leaves, Balkan tells him he'll let him go like this. Who answers that he'll be the first to finish when he's done with that guild anyway. But it's a guild subordinate to the kingdom. It seems many small guilds have joined, and there are several small guilds from floor 10 to about floor 200. It's a good opportunity to complete the mission while destroying the activity base of the Fallon brothers, who, with a smile, says that now he's going to the 10th floor first. Another player asks if he already has a guild and tells him to say his name. Who, recalling the mission, says that it would be a problem to reveal it. Now he changes his expression and says that his name is Gimion, Demon Face. One of the players tells him to wait and tell them more. He was about to reach Ginny, one of his companions, but she stops him and tells him to wait, since that guy might have committed a crime before coming to the tower. Nervously, he says that there are many cases where people simply live on the earth and hide in the tower. It's like hiding your face or your real name in the tower. Hearing what the players are saying, Gina thinks that the rumors about the wave and that mask attracted quite a bit of attention. Who tells Balkan that they need to leave since they have a lot to experience? Balkan agrees, saying he's on board, and at that moment, they teleport. One of the players is amazed because they disappeared. Then we move on to Jin, where they appeared in the forest, and the system welcomes him to the 2nd floor. It gives him a mission to eliminate 10 warriors, who, taking off his hood, says it's nothing special. He tells Balkan with a smile to take care of the mission. Balkan asks if he's serious, and that he's asking him to catch them alive. Who says it's possible that they'll remain conscious, as he's going to experiment with magic, so he tells Balkan to hurry if he wants to see it. Balkan points at him and calls him shameless, and that he shouldn't use all his magic and wait for him. Ario says it's okay to complete the mission that way. Who says if he doesn't like it, he can take it. He says he's nervous, because he can't believe he's capable of using magic. Now, at that moment, he proceeds to test the power of the demon race by creating a dark flame. Seeing the flame, he thinks to himself that it's magic. But Ario interrupts him, calling him Ida Bunny, and tells him there's a koboldi in the bush. He quickly lunges towards Jin. Gin, with a big smile, says it's fine since he's going to test his power. He proceeds to launch the dark flame, but the koboldi dodges it multiple times, impressing him. But Jin tells him that's an attack he doesn't need to hit. The koboldi stops when he sees a crack in his shoulder. He starts screaming as he fades away. Ario asks Jin what just happened, who replies that magic is a tyrannical force and the unworthy can't withstand it. With a smile, he thinks he only used a bit of magic. Then Gin approaches the koboldi's soul and says the important part starts now. After taking the koboldi's soul, he says that by injecting magic into a soul, an even stronger spirit will be born. Gina, clenching her teeth, says the soul is crumbling, and it seems like the soul can't handle the magic. She has to reduce the concentration. If he uses 1 out of the 10 magic, it'll work. After he succeeded with the experiment, he approaches Ario, who tells him he did it, and it seems difficult, who says that he was actually surprised it was easier than he thought. Given that no other race except demons could use pure magic, nobody must have known that it was such an easy power to handle. At that moment, Balkan interrupts, saying he's made of magic, and if it worked correctly, he's a spirit using magic, so he can call him Soul Killer, who says Soul Killer is fine, while Balkan stares at Jin's creation. He says Jin is supposed to be the disciple, and his skill is perfect. Gin, looking at him, thinks that every time he captures a soul, he needs to inject magic into it. At that rate, it would be difficult to use it in real combat, but he sees something that even he doesn't. He says there's no need to summon Balkan since he's superior to Jin in summoning and deploying minions. He tells him his ability to command and deploy invocations during battle is excellent. Balkan says it looks like he finally has a reason to honor his master, but he quickly changes his expression when he sees Jin planning to use magic with him. Balkan, shouting loudly, calls Jin by his real name and asks him what he's doing, who replies that he'll inject magic into his soul and turn into a demon spirit. The spirits he creates will automatically become demon spirits and will be stronger than a koboldi spirit. He says he'll use all 10 of his magic, so he tells him to hang on. Ario says it's Elder but is interrupted by Finn, who tells him not to make a scene. The The first spiritual master won't die from something like that. Val yells at him that when he gets out, he'll tear him apart.